Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of DM in Law. I'm Cody, and of course, as always, my co-host Tori.
Yo.
And today is kind of a continuation on what we did in episode 4, which was to kind of take some time, talk about the original characters we liked, abilities we thought maybe were overrepresented / underrepresented, class builds that we personally or maybe guide our players towards. And officially, as time of recording, all 3 of the base 2024 versions of the books are now out. So eventually the world will slowly transition into 2024. I don't think I'm alone in saying that a lot of us older people are taking our time to transition over.
Yeah, I don't know a single person who is super gung-ho about switching over to the now dubbed 5.5. But I mean, it's still worth checking out. There are some very interesting points. There are some really cool ways that they've built on, and we'll explore a little bit of that today with 2024 class, the 2024 editions of the D&D classes. Because there are some very interesting upgrades, there are some downgrades, but overall, interesting way that they have sort of rebalanced these classes.
Yeah. Looking and doing a little bit of studying over the last week or so, I feel like there's been a bit of a power creep. There's definitely been making things a little bit more streamlined. And like you said, some of it for certain classes I think is amazing. I love it. And then some other classes that they've kind of tried to unify things, which I know makes sense, but I liked the individuality before. So maybe I'm a edge case here. But I don't know. We'll peruse through this. It's going to be interesting because 2024 we've played that for 10 years, or at least I have. I started in 2024, but you've played it for what, 7?
I think you mean the 2014. Yeah 2014 I started playing the 2014 version. It must have been like 2016, 2017. So I think 5e had only been out for a couple of years when I started. Oh god, I've been playing the 2014 edition. I've been playing that almost 7-8 years. I'm so used to it. I don't really need the book almost ever.
Yeah. I feel so weird now because I used to be able to quote things out of the 2014 version, and now I feel so. I don't know. It's kind of a good place to be though, because we get to kind of feel like the players that we help guide. Like I'm fresh to this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going through. You know me. I love my magic caster classes, but with half the things that have been changed, I'm like, how does this work again? What is a magic action? Is that different than a one action casting time? Is this the same? Is it different? I don't know. But honestly, very interesting.
One thing I did want to mention that as a kind of a general thing they've done for all the classes that has changed from 2014, which I personally do really enjoy, is in 2014 version, you would get some classes that would get their kind of like class features at level 2. Some of them would even get kind of some stuff at level 1. They've completely unified that now, where level 3 is where your class identity comes out, and they've also taken some things from some classes level 3 stuff and kind of sprinkled them in in levels 1 and 2, so that everyone can kind of do magic, everyone can kind of do their class thing, but they come alive at level 3, which I think unifying it is amazing.
Yeah, and I feel like that's really interesting for, a lot of one-shots or mini-series or small collection of adventures. People will typically do levels 1 through 4, so it's really nice to sort of see all of your player characters go through everything together in order instead of, why can this person do this, but I don't have this yet? Everybody goes through the same thing at the same time, which I think for newer players is a really, really good thing to have, because there's a lot less confusion in learning this game. And I think as a DM, having that be unified makes it a lot easier for you as you're guiding your players through this newer version of this game.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, without further ado, I mean, first one up is Barbarian. We're just going off some cliff notes here because, again, it's Wizards of the Coast has been very clear that this is not replacing 2014. This is an update. So not going to go over everything to the same degree as we did in 2014, but off the top, a big thing they've changed, which again, I do quite like this, is rage used to only last for a minute. And if there was ever a turn where you didn't take damage, the rage would drop. That would lead to weird circumstances of characters asking allies to hit them, or DMs having to rule that, like, yes, barbarian, you can punch yourself in the face and your rage continues. They've changed that now to where rage lasts 10 minutes, and if you force enemies to take saving throws, that also counts. And I do love that you can, by putting kind of like stress on your opponent, whether it is physically represented as damage or not, that's still fueling that rage that barbarians, that's kind of their defining thing.
Yeah. I think when I read it in the book, I did a double take and I was kind of like, is this a typo? Did they just add a 0 at the end of this 1 minute and just forget? But it's interesting because like with every barbarian subclass, sometimes their rages do different things. So having this extra time allotted allows for your barbarian to have more versatility throughout not just combat, but even like in other scenarios, whether it's a social scenario or something to do with like a puzzle or a dungeon crawl. So it allows players playing as barbarians to find other ways and other uses for their rages, which I think is super cool that they have like that extended time. But even just other things, like they changed primal knowledge, which is like it's a it's a level 3 thing, but they changed how it is for 2024. Essentially, I love that you can use your strength, like your strength stat, instead for things like acrobatics checks, intimidation, perception, survival, and funny enough, stealth. You think of a barbarian and they're like these big hulking characters, but you can now use your strength score for a stealth check, which is typically dexterity. Like, that's kind of hilarious.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what you said. I used to only think of rage as a combat ability that barbarians had. You didn't really have players, and I wouldn't even think to give a player a suggestion of like, hey, why don't you use rage to help you get across this chasm? I believe in the past it did give you advantage to like strength checks and whatnot, but I like that it's specific where, like, yeah, when your players inevitably gather around a puzzle and start playing the whole who's best at strength, I like that the barbarian can kind of say, like, well, if I burn this, I can now use this, which might stop them from fading into the background as just the combat role. And now they can take on a slight roguish ranger monk role, which I've always liked barbarian. It's the class I would always play if like someone needed me to fill a slot and I only had like 5 minutes to make a character. Barbarian's always my go-to, so I'm on board for this.
Yeah, and I like that even for newer players, like it centers a lot of the features around that concept of the barbarian's rage. Even later on, like with persistent rage, they've changed it instead of it only ending when you choose to. Like, you can regain all your rage uses once per day. Like you could essentially max out the number of times that you've raged, and then you're like, actually, I'm gonna get back all of my rages and just keep going. Especially if you're using it in a way that sort of is for utility, you have more uses of it now.
Yeah, this is kind of a unifying thing that I do miss slightly. I always kind of liked the fluffiness. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but I think it's just a product of me learning D&D with 3rd edition, where some of this stuff feels like it's an homage to those older systems. So, like, I always like things like, at a certain level, I can just rage and basically stay in it forever. And druids would later on get unlimited wild shape. And a lot of these lead to broken and or clumsy, messy ruling situations. I like the that a lot of classes now are getting something where it's like, hey, whatever special thing you do, whether it's key points or rage points or other like magical points like sorcery points, everyone seems to get some way of like recharging, which is awesome before a big battle. In our group, we've had that where players stumble across the boss and go, crap, I don't have XYZ. And now it's like, okay, boom, for this one fight, I'm kind of amped up. I've got everything back. Let's do this. So again, I like it. I don't like it for every class, and I'll bring it up when I don't like it. But for Barbarian, I like it.
One thing that I did want to touch on, because we haven't really talked too much about subclasses, but I did just want to point out for Barbarian in particular, they've in the 2024 book, they've put out 4 subclasses for every single character class. With the Barbarian, though, and like maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've looked into, it seems that the Path of the World tree is in fact a brand new subclass. It's not one that I've come across at all.
Yeah, I heard the same from online that one is, it's like a new one. Yeah, I heard the
Yeah.
same thing. It's either new or it's a renaming from what I understand, but it's like still quite new.
Yeah, like it's one that not a lot of people are really like familiar with. But one thing, like I looked into it and I started reading like all the different things that come of it. It kind of simplifies another like subclass. Like there's the path of wild magic or whatever that subclass is. That does give you kind of a little bit of what path of the world tree is. But I like that it takes out a lot of that chaos. And instead it's like it gives you slight healing abilities with like giving temp HP at like level 3. And then there's a lot to do with teleportation because that's really what like the tree of Yggdrasil, like it really is. It's like, it's the world tree being able to like get from place to place, but it's also like the tree of life. So a lot of healing abilities. And it's cool because you can like teleport places. It's almost like having like an instant misty step where you can like teleport as a bonus action at like higher levels, which again adds a lot of utility to your barbarian. When in the past, typically when you think of a barbarian just being a heavy hitter, this makes the barbarian class so much more dynamic than it was before, which for me and my group we love, because that just makes it like for any character or any player or DM who loves to have like those story beats, a lot of the social aspect of like role playing and developing those characters, the way that the barbarian class is set makes it a lot better for those types of stories and games. But anyway, that's my little spiel about that. But your favorite class, my probably least favorite class, and I gotta say, the 2024 version of Bard actually makes me like the class a little bit more with some of the changes that they made. I don't think I'd play a Bard, like, ever, but it's definitely a little more interesting to me now with how, like, they've sort of rearranged things and also changed a couple of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, one of the things that I noticed, and this is more for, like, what they call, like, tier 4, so basically, like, levels 17 through 20, they changed how the features work for the Bard. Because originally, 2014, Bards used to have superior inspiration at level 20. Now, Bards get superior inspiration earlier, so they don't get it at level 20. They now get it at level 18. Then they get their epic boon, which we didn't talk about, but epic boons, every class level 19 gets an epic boon. So much cooler than just like an ability score increase. Anyway, level 18, superior inspiration. Level 19, epic boon. Level 20, words of creation. Words of creation is so freaking cool. Words of creation is a level 20 bard feature. And it's new, because it's not in 2014. This is specifically for 2024. Bards have mastered 2 of the words of creation, the words of life and death. They have power word heal and power word kill prepared. They just have it. And when they cast either spell, they can target a second creature within 10 feet of the first target. Like, that's crazy. To have the ability to just have that on hand, they can go ahead and cast it, and then they can use it a second time on a second target within 10 feet.
Being a social class, it's cool that they thematically incorporated that, like, their mastery of language is so powerful that they unlock like arcane hidden meaning in those things, which is, yeah, very cool. And if you're going to play a true bard to level 20, that's very cool to be this deadly foe who almost needs to have like a chained mouth up at all times.
Yeah, like you brought this up last time, but it's like basically what I really like about 2024 specifically, they've really incentivized players to try sticking with that one class all through 20 levels. It's like, yes, you can multi-class, but the fact that they added this for Bard, like, I would never consider playing a Bard, but you bet if I got that, I would totally stick with Bard all the way through just to, at like an epic level one shot or campaign or whatever. Like, to be able to have that, that's a huge boon. That's a huge thing to have. And the fact that bards didn't have that before, wild.
Well, one thing that I noticed about bards, because I'm one of my friends in our group plays a bard, and I've been kind of helping him because bard was my first class. And if you're a 2014 DM, you've said this a million times when you've got potentially newer players or people that get excited and might forget. When someone has bardic inspiration, how it used to work is you had to decide if you were going to add bardic inspiration before the DM stated whether they succeeded or failed. And that was a very important caveat because there could be excitement at the table. You could be a DM like myself who might be a little too quick on the draw and forget that someone can use that. The new 2024 now, you can actually apply it after you've rolled. And it's been determined whether something succeeds or fails, which I think is huge because it's just going to help with that weird, awkward table interaction of it's not my player's fault that I was too quick. And, I was kind of almost playing it like 2024 anyways. And I like that. I like that. I like how it's, you roll a d20. Oh, sorry, you don't hit. Okay, well, can I add this bardic inspiration? Oh, now you hit. And it's not weird to be like, feel like you're breaking a rule by going, well, technically, I already said you missed and you can't do it, but I didn't give you time to think about it, so yeah, I'll allow it. I like that they've just kind of embraced that, which is amazing. I didn't realize this, I guess, because I haven't played a bard in a long time, but bards get like no damaging magic. Really struggle, and the only thing they used to get was magical secrets, which let them take 2 spells from the wizard class, which allowed them to take things like fireball, lightning bolt, which was awesome. The new magical secrets, though, let you pick any number of spells. So if you wanted to play a very damaging bard, you can. And if you also wanted to play a more healing bard, you can. Like, you basically just get to steal from a class list, which is really cool. Now, there are some exceptions. Paladin, Ranger, and Warlock are off. You can't do those ones. But I really like that. I like that bards are kind of meant to be an everything magical user, and I think the new magical secrets really embraces that.
Which honestly, it makes sense. Like that's part of the whole reason that they have that feature, Jack of all trades. Like they're supposed to be able to kind of like do or be anything, and like that's even reflected in like the subclasses that they've chosen to put in the player's handbook. It's like you have, because you have Valor, you have Glamour, you have Dance, and College of Lore. So you literally have dancing, you have fey magic, you have like magical knowledge and storytelling, and then you have like your sword fighting. So like there's a little bit of everything. I don't think I'd ever be the type of bard to choose like singing or storytelling. I'm like, no, my bard would probably not talk. But like there's different subclasses that it can be chosen, and I like that it is so versatile.
Absolutely. They've really embraced that, bards don't have to just be the lute playing guy in the tavern. They can be exquisite painters or poems or through dance. Like they've really embraced that it's just human expression in one of the many forms that make up that sort of thing.
Yeah. But like honestly, the list of bard spells, while it doesn't have a lot of like, heavy hitters, it's not a bad list of spells. Like a lot of it is the stuff that you would expect, but like the spells list, it's decent. Like you can still do a lot with what's here.
We also shout out the fact that the spell list is actually with the class, which is freaking amazing.
It's so good. I actually really like how they've like outlined all of the spells. It actually like sorts it into lists of like level 1, level 2, and then it lists out the school of magic. It says whether or not it has concentration right there. And then you can flip into the actual like you can read more into it when you get to like the spells chapter and see what that spell is all about. But like honestly, most spells are, at least most of like the lower level spells, they're pretty self-explanatory.
I love that because the amount of times players are like, well, what spells do I have? And I'm like, oh, it's like somewhere in the thirds, like just flip to the back of the book, which is always awkward. And then sometimes it can be almost damaging to the book. I actually had to replace my original 2014 player's handbook because the pages were falling out due to people flipping through so aggressively. And I just like that. Yeah, you go to Bard, and pretty much everything you need is there. Now, you might need to look up an exact wording of a spell and whatnot, and that's always going to happen. But the fact that they allow a lot of these classes, Bard included, to now change their cantrips every level, the fact that they have that as a quick reference is just awesome. It seems like the people making the book really did play D&D and went, why isn't this here? So I'm not going to lie, Tori, when it comes to Cleric, this one, the changes I don't know as much about, so I'll probably let you take the lead on Cleric.
Okay, there's a couple of classes that have done this, but Cleric is obviously like the first one on the list. Level 1, you can actually like choose sort of your path of how you want to be. So when you think of Cleric, you think of two things. You think of like the support class that's a little bit of a tank and has really heavy hits. They have weapons, they fight, and they also cast heal as like, or like, their healing word, their cure wounds, whatever. Then you have some clerics who are a little heavier on the spell casting. So you kind of have these two lanes, and they're fully aware. Whoever decided to make these changes to cleric, fully aware of this. So, like, aside from your spellcasting at level 1, you also have, like, your divine order. So you choose in that moment at level 1 whether you want to be, like, a protector or a thaumaturge. So you get to decide, do you think you're going to be a cleric that hits things and, is fighting more often, or are you going to use more magic? And several classes do this at level 1. Like, Druid is one of them, Ranger's another one. Essentially, I like that it kind of gives you a little bit of choice on, like, how you want to design your cleric before you even have to choose your subclass. Other things that are really, really cool with this, so they've kind of changed, so they've made updates to Channel Divinity, because everybody, when you think of your Channel Divinity, you think of whatever your subclass gives you and turn undead. Obviously, for this 2024 edition, you have not chosen a subclass. So they've given us a new one called Divine Spark, which is kind of cool. Basically, you can damage creatures with either necrotic or radiant damage. You're supposed to, like, use your holy symbol. You hold it aloft, they make a constitution saving throw, and then on a failed save, you get to decide if you want to deal necrotic damage or radiant damage. So I like that there's choice in that. I like that it can do a lot of things narratively, but also, like, depending on what you're fighting. If something is going to be hit extra hard with radiant damage, choose that. If necrotic damage is going to do a lot more, use that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot more.
Well, that used to be a hard choice. I really do like level 2 is sounding almost, and I'm thinking about if I was to make a character, even narratively, is you're at level 2, it's like you're starting to kind of connect with whatever deity is reaching out to you, but you don't quite know who they are yet. And so it's like you used to have to make a very specific build if you wanted to be a cleric, which caused like damage to people, like inflict wounds and all that, or you were a generic cure wounds type. I like that you can kind of do both. Like it's almost like the gods are fighting for your favor, and you can kind of play that off as like radiant one turn and necrotic the next turn.
Well, it's interesting too because it kind of fights with that same with the same thing of, like, level 20 bard, right? Like, it comes down to life and death. You're essentially taking these two forces of, necrotic, death, radiant, celestial light, or life, and it's like you're kind of playing with both of these spheres of reality. But overall, for cleric, what I really like is they seem to have made cleric as a class a little bit more balanced in the sense of regular class features versus a subclass. You still have really cool stuff with your subclasses, but when it comes to, like, all clerics, they have this thing, like, they have seer undead instead of destroy undead. It seems like when you look at the language involved with this class, they've tried to make it a little less religious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it seems, it makes sense. They're kind of taking away, they're trying to steer a little bit further away from, like, the religious connotations and making it a little bit more divine or celestial. But they're really honing in on, like, there are still gods and there are still patrons.
You get Blessed Strike, which is now split into two different things, which is you can either choose to do some extra melee damage or you can do extra magic. So that plays into your level 1 choice if you want to. It doesn't matter what you picked. This ability equally represents both sides of that coin, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed too, because, like, just looking into what seer, like, the differences between destroy undead and seer undead, I feel like the newer version definitely caters more to the players who really like to roll dice.
Yeah, it operates like the sleep spell, doesn't it? It's now a pool of dice, I believe, which I love. I loved sleep, and I hated that it faded out so early. Having this pool of numbers and then being able to divvy them out is super cool. So I'm actually pretty excited
Yeah,
for that.
like, seer undead, way cooler than just being like destroy undead and then it's just gone. It's like,
Well, it was an all or nothing for the most part, and a lot of times it didn't work. It would be like you roll a wisdom save or whatever. Did it work? No. Okay, well you just wasted your turn because nothing happens.
they they also changed how divine intervention works. So in the past, you would roll a D100 or your percentile dice, and if you rolled um your level or lower, your god would intervene. And then same thing with, like, greater divine intervention, they would intervene automatically. What they've done with it now, I like the way that it's phrased, basically you still roll, but the way that your god acts when intervening for you, it's chosen based on like a spell. So you essentially choose a spell that you want your god to like cast for you. So there is still like that way of like asking or praying to your god to like intervene, but the methodology behind that is a little different than how it used to work. Same with like the greater divine intervention. Essentially it's the same thing, but the way that they phrased it is like it's essentially a wish spell.
See, I don't like these changes. And the
Yeah, no.
reason why, and I'm saying this from a DM side point of view, you're taking away our ability to be fun and creative. Where when that player finally rolls that, let's say they're level and they do divine intervention, and you roll a 9, and you're like, oh my god, my god gets to intervene, and the player's going to tell you what they want to happen. And then we as the DM get to incorporate story or desire or be like, okay, like I love the wish spell because like I always tell my players when you're gonna cast a wish, be like either write it out or be super specific on your wording because the whole point of wish is that you're allowed to kind of twist and mold it. And I like to do that with my gods where what you asked for might not fully come to fruition or you might be too vague, and then it's kind of like how you can say like I'm gonna take care of you or I'm gonna take care of you. Like it can mean the same thing. And I liked the storytelling aspect of both those abilities. I don't like it. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the reason why I love the old one is in season 1 of Vox Machina. Ashley Johnson's character Pike used divine intervention and had it work, and she had this golden fist grab a dragon by the tail and slam it into the ground because it was actually flying away. I think it was Thordak or it was one of the dragons from the Chroma Conclave, and that was just such a hype moment. It was so cool, and those are the moments that like I haven't forgotten about it, and I bet you those like that cast hasn't forgotten about. And now you're just turning it into a spell. I don't like this. I'm not gonna lie.
Like I feel like everything going for cleric is so good, and then you get to divine intervention and you're like, and we're done. Like,
I might just roll it as the old way on that, if I'm
yeah,
being honest.
honestly, I probably would do the same too because like I don't love that it takes away DM agency for divine intervention because like it's just such a great way to like have these ways to connect your characters with elements of the story without being bogged down by the rules of a spell.
Yeah, yeah, or a spell being a bad fit for the current situation. Like divine intervention was it lets you call upon your deity. You might have to barter with them. Like that turns into such a cool role play mid combat. You're about to die and you really need your deity to cast revivify or heal your party, and it's like, what are you gonna give me? What are you gonna do? And it's such a cool moment, but I don't know. Yeah, and this is part of where the new version comes out where I don't like it, where they've turned what used to be very loose, open-ended abilities into this functions as this spell. And it's like, eh.
I did say at the beginning of this, not everything would be an upgrade. There were definitely some downgrades, and Divine Intervention 2024 edition, definitely a downgrade.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's
Well,
okay. There's plenty more downgrades, but there's also a lot of upgrades. So
yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, we're on to Druid. First thing off the bat that I really like, which is just a simple tweak, and I think this is where they've kind of grown. And as much as I liked the old stuff, I think this modernizes it in a good way. No longer are they limited to very specific weapons. They're proficient in all simple weapons. So if you want to play a thematic sickle wielding druid, awesome. You don't have to be stuck with a staff or a scimitar. And then also when it comes to weapon proficiency, there's no more restriction on metal armor, which I never truly enforced, I'll be honest, but I don't hate the idea of your druid having to find like woods that are as hard as steel. Like that also works, but I know that not everybody wants to play like a very like I'm wearing leaves as a druid. Like I understand this, and it's obviously easy to fluff up however you need to make it feel good in your story, but I think they're great just like simplifications.
yeah, like you can absolutely play a druid who, might be so attuned to nature that like seeing anything mechanical definitely, gives them like, the weird like side eye. Like one thing that I will always appreciate when my artificer sorcerer character came in for one of your games and your druid saw my like little mechanical cat and he was just like, I hate this. What the heck is this? This is not natural. And then like on the side in reality, he's like, okay, but actually like I love this.
Yeah, yeah, I loved that. I love that little dynamic between your characters where um your character is so into science and pushing the envelope, and then you've got another character who finds it almost insulting and affront to nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
A wonderful moment, and I'm like, I love this. This is great. But with Druid and like how they've updated it, Druid is another one where they kind of have you making that choice at level 1. Do you want your character to be a little bit more into magic or into like physically protecting nature through other means? So like you have magician where you have like extra things where you can choose extra cantrips, you have extra bonuses for like your magic, and then you have warden where you're a little bit more of like a battle hardened warrior of nature. So again, level 1, having that choice of like making your character a little bit more specialized in one of the 2 routes that you would normally choose for druid. Then you have your wild shape. One thing that I don't love about wild shape now is that you have known forms. So like a set number of like animals or beasts that your character can like shift into every day. I don't love that because like I find that a little bit limiting. So I probably will just choose to forego that.
It's forgive me if I'm wrong. It's essentially there's just templates now, right? It's like this is the swim template, this is the burrowing template. Like it's just like a generic stat block that you're like this represents an octopus, a shark, a fish, a trout, kind of thing.
Sort of. Like that's kind of always how it's been, where it's like if you choose like a certain fish, you would just use like a one particular fish stat block. But like just looking into this, I don't think it limits it to specific stat blocks for like specific types of animals. It's just you only have like 4 different forms that you can shift into every day, and then it like increases from 4 to 6 to 8. I don't love that because again, I just find that really limiting. At the same time, like how many times are people actually like wild shaping into more forms than that per day?
I like it for the fact that there have been situations where, because again, the druid was kind of a very broken class in 2014, so I think they had to. This one got kind of nerfed a lot.
Yeah.
I like it for the set fact of power players who are gonna claim to be able to turn into some obscure creature, and there was really no way before, unless you as the DM overruled them, to be like, hey, you've never seen an aardvark. But now it's like, well, is this from one of the prepared forms you picked? It's a great rules lawyer ability if you need it, but I would probably play it like you said. I would probably just not put a limit on the forms known unless it becomes abusive or if someone's really abusing that aspect of that ability.
Yeah, like I get it in a way because having too much choice sometimes gets in the way of like players and what they choose to do, but at the same time, like
Dungeons and
you
Dragons.
used to be able to just choose what you turned into as long as it stayed within like, the challenge rating and the beast class. But like if you only have 4 known forms, what if none of those are useful in the moment and you don't know you forgot how to change into a snake and really all you have is like a spider or a
Yeah,
flea?
I agree. It's another one of these abilities that's kind of taking the Dungeons and Dragons out of Dungeons and Dragons. Instead of the idea, like the idea of this game is that it's not a video game.
Yeah.
It's not bound by some arbitrary code in the background, and that was what I've always loved about it. So this, yeah, I like it because again, this was a super broken ability, especially at higher level. They had to do a lot to this. I don't think this is quite the proper fix for it, but I get it.
I do think it's really funny though, of all things. I think it's really funny that in this updated version, you retain your ability to speak while you're in wild shape. Because,
I
like,
don't hate that, to be honest. That comes up a
I
lot.
I don't hate it, but it's just so funny to me because I'm imagining like a group of players, most of them who know 2014, with one player who maybe is like more seasoned with 2024, and they just wild shape and they just start talking, and literally everybody else at the table is like, huh? Why are you
Yeah.
speaking? And I just find that so comical. But I don't know. Druids able to speak but unable to cast spells doesn't really make sense to me.
No, I agree. I agree. Also, they get an animal companion now, so rip to our rangers, who the one unique thing they kind of got is now a druid level 2 ability.
Okay, but also druids with their wild companion. I don't know if that's like Beastmaster. It seems to read more like spellcasters with a familiar. Because it essentially is the find familiar spell.
Yeah, but that's supposed to be more of like a sorcerer wizard thing. I don't know.
I don't know if I like it just because it seems like such a like you summon a nature spirit that assumes an animal form to aid you. Like I don't know if a druid would really want a magic. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for
That's a fair
everyone who
point.
plays a
No, you
druid.
make a really good point. It's like as much as a druid is a part of nature, would they not want an actual real creature? Because like that's nature.
Like they're just gonna summon a nature spirit from the Fae when they could literally just have like a true
Yeah.
wild companion. I don't know.
Well,
Like
and they
that just seems
literally get
weird.
speak with animals for free. Like it. So this is the first time we're kind of seeing something that's going to appear a bit more now. Is that certain spells have almost become staples of certain classes, and druids now get speak with animals prepared for free. So they get to actually cast it a specific number of times per day, absolutely free. Which
Which, like, that's
I like.
fine. That makes sense. It's just maybe this is just me, but like sometimes if I have to like when it's always fun when characters and players want to like speak with, the squirrel who's just been by their camp for a really long time, or they want to talk to the birds so that they can go find their own pet bird who flew off to go who knows where. Like I just see it the way that druids work now, where they just want to talk to every single animal and every single plant, and I'm like, I already struggle with NPCs, and you're telling me now I've got to create a character voice for the squirrel next door and the raccoon living in my shed? Like, okay, I'll do it. I just don't know how original I'm gonna be.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, the spell. I mean, it's good in the fact that it's just always prepared, which has interrupted my games before, where our druid's like, "Oh crap, I didn't take speak with animals today," and that's a problem. So I like it for that. But I do also, like you said, it's always a fun moment where there's such an effort and a workup to be like, oh my god, we got to speak to this pigeon, and then the pigeon's like, sup guys, I'm a pigeon, like I have nothing to give you, I'm a pigeon dude.
Yeah, I do have to remind myself sometimes when I think this actually happened with one of my groups. They had to start asking pigeons like where certain things had gone, and my favorite thing to do is to just play stupid because the intelligence level for all of these creatures is so low. And I always forget that, and then I have to remind myself and go, "Oh yeah, no, if you're talking to a pigeon, the pigeon's like, do you have birdseed? I want birdseed. Actually, I want bread. No, is that food?" And I remember, like, yeah, and like when the beast intelligence scores are that low, you're not getting a lot of answers, and that kind of stuff is hilarious. But other things with the druid class that I think are interesting, like now that I'm really looking at it, they actually modeled druid kind of after how they did cleric, because with cleric and they had blessed strikes, it's sort of the same thing with elemental fury. Because level 7, you get elemental fury, you choose either potent spell casting or primal strike. So similar to like that level 1 choice, you again make this choice for like, do you want to continue the route of like, increasing and improving your magic, or do you want to take something that's a little bit more, important for you as as like, a fighter or something in combat? And then you again have improved elemental fury. So lots of choices to be made, but again, models similarly to how they've done cleric. But yeah, honestly, this class, some interesting things that they've improved. Definitely some downgrades, just like cleric.
Yes. So what two last points I wanted to make about druid, again because it was something that I had a player who used to abuse this because of unlimited wild shapes for level 20. Wild shape, you now use your own HP. You do not assume the HP of the animal, so no more like unlimited slash tripling of your own HP, so you're nigh unkillable, which is great. I like that. And they have this one I like and I don't like. So Arch Druid used to be that you get an unlimited amount of wild shapes, which again, super broken because everyone would just turn into giant crocodiles and never die. They've now made it where anytime you roll initiative, you will gain at least one use of wild shape, which I think is great. You go into combat, you've got it. I don't know if that's worth making it a level 20 ability, because the other part of this is you get the ability to turn your wild shapes into spell slots, and the amount of wild shape charges you get rid of is the level of spell you get back. I like it. I don't think I would want to wait till level 20 to get it. These feel like level 10 abilities, not level 20. I just pure classed into a druid and this is all I get at level 20, when my bard can do power word kill on 2 people. Like,
Oh, you know what? We actually skipped over that. They kind of did introduce that for at level 5. Because that's wild resurgence. Because essentially, like, you can extend a wild shape use to get back a level 1 spell slot or vice versa. So I mean, you do have that, but I get what you mean where, like, when you want this to have a little bit more meaning, waiting till level 20 when the first time that you have it is at level 5 seems like a really, really long stretch to be able to do that. I would definitely, if not if not at level 10, at level 15 at least, because you already have wild resurgence at level 5.
yes. Oh, I am sorry. When you get Nature's Magician, which is the second half of Archdruid, my apologies. It's for every 1 wild shape, you get 2 levels worth of spell slots left back. So
I
it's
mean,
not terrible. I mean, you
but
could that
similar to wild resurgence, like, is it really worth a 15 level wait?
and okay, let's by level 20, you're getting 4 uses of wild shape per day, um, which means you could get a level 8 spell if you really needed it. So it's not it's okay. I mean, again, I just think compared to some of the other level 20 abilities, this one's kind of meh.
Yeah, agreed. But I feel like with Druid, I'm not entirely surprised because it seems to lean really heavily into, like, the subclasses. So I'm not super like Archdruid, not as great as it used to be, but considering like all the stuff that you have throughout your subclasses and like more early to mid level druid, it's not that bad.
I think Druid has always been a really good class. I think 2024 tries to bring some classes up, and it definitely pulls a few down a little bit, and that's going to happen. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that Druid is one of the ones that got pulled down a little bit. Doesn't mean
Yeah,
it's a bad
exactly.
class. I still think it was the first class I ever played. I still love Druids, but we're going to see this again with Paladin, where they had to pull some things down a little bit, and then they pull other things up. If I'm gonna be upset about that, and it means that I'm now really excited about Barbarian and Fighter, for example, the next one on our list, then I'll take it because there's some really cool things going on with some of these other classes.
Yeah, exactly. Also, like speaking of fighter, let's tackle fighter. Like just looking at the list of everything for 2014 versus 2024, it doesn't look like there's a lot, but there is. Like they've definitely,
Tons. This class is like a glow up. It's
oh,
amazing.
yeah. And honestly, it didn't take a lot. Like what is it at level 2, level 5, level 9? You have all of this stuff that focuses on like it has a more tactical shift. Like it really does look at different ways to elevate your combat regardless of what you're doing on your turn. Like they've really brought a lot of versatility in combat to fighter and I love that. Because like originally you had your extra attack, you had your indomitable, then you had more extra attacks, more indomitables,
That was their
more
thing. It was
action
just extra
surges.
attacks. That was used to be what it was. It was feats, extra attacks. That's pretty much what made a fighter a fighter.
Yeah. And now it's like with all of these little tactical things that you can do, or like studied attacks, like there's more. It's not just you rolling a bunch of dice and then hitting. Like you can decide what is it, like tactical shift. You can move up to half your speed without invoking opportunity attacks when you extend a use of second wind. Like you can
Yeah,
be
that's amazing. Second wind being able to do multiple things is so good.
and you can be a lot more strategic about what you do. So I like that it's taking fighter and it's like, okay, this is not just a hack and slash giant bully. This is like a fighter is smart and knows how to strategize in the sphere of combat.
Fighter nowadays with one of the new mechanics of 2024, which is weapon mastery, actually makes changing weapons important and also thematic and cool. I don't know the like almost every character I've played and pretty much all my players, you pick a starting weapon, and unless you find a magical weapon that's better, you're going to use a longsword from level 1 to 20. You're going to use a quarterstaff from level 1 to 20. I love that the fighter is able to change what weapons that they get mastery in, so that they can do and just to give some kind of overview so people understand. So, a new mechanic of the game, weapon mastery, is that weapons now get a keyword, and if you have mastery in that word, it's almost like a class ability. It's like you can reduce the speed creatures can move. You can knock creatures prone. You can do one's called Nick, where you do even if you miss with your attack, you still do a bit of damage. It's really cool thematic stuff, and I like the idea of your party fighting a creature and then coming up against another one, and your fighter taking what they learned and being like, okay, for this fight I'm going to use a hand axe because this ability benefits against this, and it's so cool. I actually really want to play a fighter for 2024.
They've definitely done some really interesting things with this class now. Because before, like, fighter is statistically everybody's favorite class. And, like, I can see why. It's easy to build, it's easy to play, it can be a lot of fun to hit things. But now with this, like, this is such a cool change to this class that I never really looked twice at before. Now I'm like, okay, this seems dynamic and complex in a really simple way. But, like, I absolutely would love to try to play fighter at some point, because the way that they've made these changes, super easy and accessible to literally everybody.
Yeah, it's like just kind of looking it over right now. It's just there's a lot of really great things. I mean, they've still definitely kept with the thematic. The fighter gets more attacks than anybody else. Its epic boon is that it gets to make 4 attacks, which is down from 5 in certain editions. I really like fighter. I don't really have anything bad to say. The only thing I will comment on, and I think this was very much needed, is action surge used to be extremely vague in how it was worded. It would say that you would regain an action and possibly a bonus action, which made it hard as a DM because, if you ruled that they didn't get their another bonus, it was like, well, the book kind of says I get it, but kind of doesn't. And now they've limited to the fact that you cannot use a magic spell because a lot of players were multi-classing and they were double casting Fireball.
Yeah.
And because that was one of the few ways to get around the the whole you can't cast 2-leveled spells. Action surge was worded in a way that let you get around that. So this one's also gotten a slight nerf, but I wouldn't even call it a nerf.
It's so minimal. It's so minimal in comparison to, like, what 2014 was all about. So I'm like, you know what? I'll take it. Like, this is still really cool, even without that.
Yeah, fighter, I love, and we haven't even gotten into all the subclasses. So you think about all the cool things they get as you've picked fighter. Everything we just discussed, you get, and you still get a lot of the stuff with fighter where you can go slightly magical. You can still go very tactical. Lots of great options there.
Yeah. Okay, monk. They've done a lot with the monk class. First of all, like, immediately, first thing you notice, they've taken a lot of that, like, East Asian motifs out of it, which I love because it definitely could make you a little uncomfortable when you're like, ah, yes, the East Asian stereotypes. Cool. And now they've really focused it more on, like, making it a little bit more fantasy centered. And there's so many things. Like, first of all, key points, no longer key points. They're now focus points. One thing that I really like, I think, what level did they introduce it? I think level 2. So when you're introduced to the focus points, you also have something called uncanny metabolism, which basically you can regain all your expended focus points when you roll initiative. Like, one thing that I am happy about is that for any of the actions used where you're using your key points, they've kept those the same, because I think if those were to change, I would be frustrated. So it's still Flurry of Blows, it's still Patient Defense, it's still Step of the Wind. That does not change. But Uncanny Metabolism, like, when you roll initiative, you can regain all expended focus points. Like, that's amazing, because for those instances where, maybe you've done combat several times, or maybe you use Step of the Wind through a dungeon crawl, and then you have to fight some big bad monster afterwards. Like, if you have no key points left, you're screwed. But this way, it's an interesting way to still get your points, and it's not like you can just take advantage of it forever. Like, it's only once per long rest, but still, when you're getting to higher levels,
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Like, oh god, you're level 12 and you go into combat and you only have 2 key points left. Bam! You get all 12 back immediately.
I also really like how the 3 abilities, Patient Defense, Flurry of Blows, and Step of the Wind. So you always have to spend a focus point to do Flurry of Blows, which makes sense. That's kind of a powerful ability. But the other 2 have a free version, and then they have a paid version, which gives you more, which I really like, because those are already amazing abilities. And the fact that even if you're out of key points, you can still do those things, and it just makes the monk feel extremely nimble and quick, able to move through the battle, which has always made the monk a lot of fun. and I'm on board. If you want to allow them to disengage, and it gives them some roguish ability, it gives them the mobility of a rogue, but it thematically still feels like a monk.
And I think I'm trying to remember because level 10 for the new version, you have heightened focus, which is essentially like upgrades to Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, and Step of the Wind. I don't remember there being an upgrade like that for.
I don't believe so. No.
So I think it's really cool that like for every class, like for certain classes, they really have that one thing that they like focus on. For barbarians, it was rage, but for monk, it really leans into the monk's focus and the focus points because it like really rewards you for sticking with the class and like it makes these things that are already so good about monk. If you stick with the class even longer, it just makes them even better as you go up. Like already level 2, if you have level not level 2. If a monk at level 5 has extra attack and they use Flurry of Blows, that's a lot of hits. Like right away, because you can essentially go. That's what you have your first punch plus 2 Flurry of Blows plus another one, so that's 4 hits already. And then with level 10 heightened focus, your Flurry of Blows get to make an additional unarmed strike. So you're punching for 5 times by level 10.
Yeah, yeah. I also like what they've done with Stunning Strike, where when so obviously Stunning Strike's a very powerful ability, can be the bane of a DM a lot of times because once your player figures it out, they're gonna spam it.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps the old version was like this. I could be wrong, but on a successful save, your opponent still has their speed halved, and the next person to attack them, they have advantage against that creature, which I think is awesome because nothing's fun about all or nothing abilities where it's like I do this, it didn't work, okay, my turn's over. I like that they're still allowing something to happen that still makes the attempt worth it.
Yeah, because Stunning Strike originally, it was like it all hinged on them
Saving
like
throw.
failing the saving throw. Because if
Yeah.
they failed the saving throw, great. If they succeeded on it, nothing happened. You kind of just wasted that action.
Yeah, and even was it here at level self restoration through sheer force of will, you can remove one of the fallen conditions from yourself at the end of each of your turns, like charmed, frightened, or poisoned. Like that's cool. And it's something that's really the fact that the monk is so quick and nimble and might stray away from your magic users. The fact that they can just end a condition on themselves and be ready for next turn. It's really cool. It's thematic, and it's not so broken that it makes creatures with these abilities feel like it's a waste to do it on the monk. I think it fits that perfect niche.
I feel like the monk, with the way that they have elevated this class so much, seems like they've like this is probably one of the classes that has had the most upgrades without really anything negative because they
Yeah.
have because they took the deflect missiles feature from before. They've now called it deflect attacks, and it still works the same way. But like upper level, like level 13, you have deflect energy. You can deflect against attacks with any damage type, not just bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, and now you can do melee attacks too. Even the original version is not just deflect missile; it's deflect attack. So you can deflect a melee strike, which is pretty huge. Again, you've got a character that you want to move around. You want them either assisting your spellcasters at the back or hitting maybe the archers in the back. And the ability to have self preservation in mind is huge. Like
Oh yeah,
that lets the monk be a monk, which I think they've been able to make a monk work on paper literally so well.
yeah, and it's crazy because even for like level 18 superior defense, you can just extend 3 focus points, and you're suddenly resistant to every type of damage except for force damage.
Yeah, I
Like
was just checking that one out myself. Yeah.
can you imagine your player who's a monk having resistance to everything?
So, just thinking here, Tori. I was gonna say maybe. So we've done 6 of the 12. So maybe we call it here and we do
Yeah,
a part 2 because
there's a
obviously
lot
a
to
lot to get
unpack.
into, and I don't want to take away from it and feel like we're rushing through any of these classes.
Yeah.
But I say this is probably gonna be a two-parter.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna have to be a two-parter because there's just so much to unpack. Like, we haven't even gotten to Paladin yet.
I know, and that's the first I think of. Again, it's another nerfy one. Smite, rip to divine smite.
But yes, I think we'll call it here. We've gone through the first 6 out of the 12, which means that next episode we will start with Paladin and work our way through to the end. There are so many changes to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Paladin's gonna be interesting. It's Paladin and then it's Ranger. But you know what?
I have thoughts on the Ranger thing, but we'll save those for next time.
Yes, absolutely. So once again, guys, thanks for tuning in, and look forward to speaking to you guys some more in episode 6. But I think that'll be episode 5 in the bag here.
Alrighty, cool beans. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram, Blue Sky. We are not on the Twitter app anymore, but make sure to follow us on Blue Sky. We do have a link tree where you can find us on all of our spaces online, so make sure to check that out.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right. Till next time.